I used to work late nights at an office building downtown. It wasn't a big deal, quiet, empty, perfect for focusing. But one night, I stayed a little later than usual, and that's when it happened. The office was on the 14th floor. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight, and the whole building was dead silent. I grabbed my bag and headed to the elevator. When the doors slid open, I hesitated. Something felt off. The light inside flickered faintly, and the usual hum of the elevator motor was absent. But it was late, and I just wanted to get home. I stepped in and pressed the lobby button. The doors closed with a soft ding. At first, it seemed normal. The elevator began descending smoothly, but then it jerked to a stop between floors. Great, I muttered, hitting the emergency button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness. My breath quickened as I fumbled for my phone. Just as the flashlight lit up the tiny space, the elevator lurched downward. Fast. It wasn't just falling. It felt like it was being pulled. My ears popped, and I clung to the railing, screaming for it to stop. Then, just as suddenly, it did. The doors slid open. But this wasn't the lobby. It was a long, dark hallway with flickering fluorescent lights. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, stained with something that looked like rust or blood. A cold draft hit me, and I realized the air smelled like mildew and rot. I stayed frozen in the elevator, my heart racing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed, but no one answered. I pressed the closed door button repeatedly, but the elevator wouldn't move. The buttons were dead. Then I heard it, a faint, shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. It was coming from the hallway. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice trembling. The shuffling stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. Then, out of the shadows, something stepped into the light. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its hollow eyes locked onto me. I backed into the corner of the elevator, slamming my hand against the buttons. Close, close, close. The creature took a step closer, its limbs jerking as if it didn't know how to walk properly. It reached the edge of the elevator, its bony hand gripping the doorframe. Just as it started to crawl inside, the elevator doors slammed shut. The lights flickered back on, and the elevator began moving again. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I thought I was safe, but then the numbers on the display started going haywire. 12, 7, 23, -4, -4. The elevator stopped again, the doors sliding open to reveal nothing, just blackness. And then a voice. "Come back." It was a whisper, low and raspy, but somehow right in my ear. I screamed, hitting every button on the panel. The doors closed, and the elevator shot upward faster and faster, until it felt like I was going to be crushed by the force. Then it stopped. The doors opened to the lobby, bright and normal, like nothing had happened. I stumbled out, shaking, and ran to the security desk. "Are you okay?" the guard asked, startled. I tried to explain, but he just looked at me, confused. "There's no one else here," he said. "And the elevator? It's been out of order all day." I turned back to look at it. The doors were slightly ajar, and inside was nothing but darkness. I never went back to that building, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of an elevator dinging outside my apartment door. It started when I moved into my new apartment. The place was old but charming, with creaky wooden floors and outdated fixtures. I didn't mind, it had character. But there was one thing about the building that didn't make sense: the elevator. It wasn't listed in the building plans, and my landlord swore it hadn't worked in decades.
"Just take the stairs. That thing hasn't moved since I bought the place, so it's not fine to use it."
I didn't think much of it at first. The elevator was small and tucked away at the end of a poorly lit hallway. Its rusted metal doors were covered in scratches, and there was no button to call it, just a single, ancient keyhole. For weeks, I barely noticed it. But late one night, as I was heading to my apartment, I heard a faint ding. I froze. It was past midnight, and no one else should have been on that floor. Slowly, I turned to face the elevator. The doors were slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. A chill ran down my spine. I told myself it must have been a fluke, maybe old machinery making noise. I hurried back to my apartment, locked the door, and tried to forget about it. But the elevator wouldn't let me. The next night, I heard it again. Ding. This time, I was in bed. I tried to ignore it, but then came the sound of the doors sliding open, followed by faint, rhythmic clicking, like someone or something was walking down the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. The following day, I asked my neighbors about it, but no one had heard anything. Most of them didn't even know the building had an elevator. "I've lived here 10 years, one guy said, "never seen it work." That evening, I decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I went down the hallway to the elevator. The doors were shut tight, but as I approached, I felt a draft of cold air, like the kind you'd feel in a basement. I ran my hand along the seam of the doors, and to my surprise, they slid open. Inside was a dimly lit, cramped elevator car. The buttons were covered in grime, but one stood out, a single, unmarked button at the very bottom. It didn't have a number, just a strange, circular symbol scratched into it. My curiosity got the better of me. I stepped inside and pressed the button. The elevator shuddered to life, groaning and creaking as it descended. The lights flickered, and the walls felt unnaturally close. I expected it to stop after a few seconds, but it kept going down, 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 far longer than it should have. Finally, the elevator stopped with a jolt. The doors opened, revealing a long, narrow hallway lined with doors on either side. Each door was different. Some were ornate, others plain, and a few were battered and broken. The air was thick and musty, and the faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance. I stepped out cautiously, my flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The doors didn't have numbers, just strange symbols carved into them, similar to the one on the elevator button. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed something strange. The farther I went, the more the doors seemed to change. They looked older, more decayed, like they hadn't been touched in centuries. Then I heard it, a faint whispering sound coming from behind one of the doors. I froze, my heart pounding. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, like 100 voices overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. I backed away, but as I turned to head back to the elevator, I heard a soft click behind me. One of the doors had opened, just a crack. My flashlight flickered as I stared at the door, too terrified to move. Then, a hand, a pale, skeletal hand, reached out from the darkness inside. I ran. I sprinted back to the elevator, slamming the button to close the doors. The hallway was now filled with the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming closer and closer. The doors finally slid shut, and the elevator lurched upward. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, but the relief didn't last long. The elevator wasn't going back to my floor. It stopped at another level, one I didn't recognize. The doors opened, revealing a room filled with mirrors. They were tall and cracked, reflecting distorted versions of me. My flashlight flickered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something moving in the reflections, something that wasn't me. The doors closed before I could process what I'd seen, and the elevator continued upward. When it finally stopped, I bolted out and ran straight to my apartment. I locked the door and didn't leave for 2 days. When I finally worked up the courage to go back, the elevator was gone. The space where it had been was now just a blank wall, with no sign that it had ever existed. I asked my landlord about it, but he just gave me a confused look. "What elevator?" he said. "I don't know what happened that night, or where the elevator took me. Sometimes I think I imagined it all. But late at night, when the building is quiet, I still hear it. Ding. And I know it's waiting for me."